The earth remembers what men have done to one another. Stone, bone, and iron hold the echoes of laws written in blood. In the cool light of dawn, cities awoke to markets, prayers, and the steady rhythm of daily life, and to punishments that made a single misstep a matter of life, dignity, and death. This is a journey into the most brutal punishments of the ancient world. Not to revel in cruelty, but to understand how justice, power, and terror shaped civilizations. Across continents and millennia, rulers designed penalties that enforced order, displayed authority, and deterred transgression. Some were intended to purge crime, some to humiliate, some to exact revenge, and some to perform as public theater, a warning for all who watched. We step into the courts and squares where law became spectacle, where punishment was a language of power. 1. The Assyrian display of captives. Assyria, a name whispered with equal parts fear and respect. To the Assyrian kings, victory was not enough as a private triumph. It had to be carved into the landscape. Victorious armies paraded captives along city walls, but the most chilling practice lay in what came after: mass amputations and impalement. Reliefs from royal palaces show bound prisoners led through gates, their hands and ears removed, their faces marked as living trophies. These acts served a dual purpose: to cripple insurgency and to create a visual testament that resistance would be mutilated into submission. Impalement, a word that chills the tongue, was not unique to Assyria, but their scale and the official posture made it notorious. Victims were often impaled near roads, left to die slowly while travelers looked on. The message was immediate: defy the king and your body will narrate your fate. In a world without mass media, the spectacle of the mutilated body spoke far louder than any decree. 2. Roman crucifixion. Rome, famed for law, organization, and an empire that spanned continents, also perfected crucifixion as a tool of terror. Not merely death, crucifixion was a prolonged public agony designed to degrade the condemned and reinforce the law. Victims were stripped, flogged, forced to carry the crossbeam through jeering crowds, then nailed or tied and raised for all to see. Death could take hours or days, a slow surrender to exposure, dehydration, and suffocation. Crucifixion targeted slaves, rebels, and the most reviled criminals. It was intentionally visible, along highways and near city gates, a sign that the highest punishment belonged to those who threatened public order. The stories of crucifixion survive not only in sources of law and history, but in scars on the collective memory of the ancient world. Imagine standing in the crowd, a human body stretched between earth and sky, life leaking into the dust beneath, while the city continues its routines. The spectacle binds spectators to the state's power. 3. Death by 1,000 cuts. Lingchi. In imperial China, one of the most infamous penalties was Lingchi, sometimes called death by 1,000 cuts, reserved for the gravest crimes: treason, parricide, and extreme betrayal. Lingchi was a ritualized execution that combined physical pain with symbolic obliteration. The condemned was tied, and in a controlled procedure, flesh was cut away in a sequence of slices. The aim was not only to kill but to dismember the body in stages, denying the individual an intact corpse and thus disrupting ancestral rites. Chinese legal thought placed enormous emphasis on filial duty, family, and the integrity of the body. By deforming or destroying the body, the state severed both social identity and hopes for posthumous care. The procedure was tightly controlled. Medical knowledge, executioner skill, and ritual all intertwined in this grim legal theater. 4. Breaking on the wheel. Historical debates. Breaking on the wheel is often associated with medieval Europe, not ancient India. But ancient South Asian traditions had their own exemplary punishments. Texts like the Arthashastra, a treatise on governance and punishment dated to the Mauryan period, prescribed severe penalties: maiming, enslavement, and public humiliation for theft, treason, and corruption. The goal mirrored other civilizations: protect order and deter others. A thief might lose a hand under the watch of the marketplace. An official found guilty of accepting bribes could be stripped of rank and properties, while repeat or high crimes invited corporal punishments that left bodies altered and reputations ruined. 5. Hammurabi's Code. An eye for an eye. The Babylonian king Hammurabi left a law code carved in stone, one of the earliest known collections. Its principle of lex talionis, an eye for an eye, anchors a brutal logic. Penalties were often physical and proportional in appearance. Damage inflicted warranted similar damage inflicted in return. But within the code, we also see fines and compensations, suggesting that the system aimed to regulate rather than merely titillate with cruelty. Lex talionis served two purposes: limit vengeance and formalize retribution. By prescribing a payment or an exact mutilation, The law sought to prevent endless cycles of private retaliation. Yet for the condemned, the result could be irreversible bodily harm. 6. Carthage and sacrificial allegations. Carthage has long been shrouded in controversy. Greco-Roman writers accused the city of child sacrifice, infants thrown into pits and offered to gods such as Baal. Archaeology reveals top hets, burial grounds containing urns with the cremated remains of infants and animals. But scholars still debate whether these remains signal systematic sacrifice or are ritual cemetery deposits for those who died in infancy. If child sacrifice happened, it served as an extreme form of punishment and appeasement in times of crisis. If not, the accusations nevertheless served as an ideological weapon for Rome and Greece to depict Carthage as barbaric. Either way, the accusations reveal how ancient societies used reports of cruelty to define enemies and justify conquest. 7. Human sacrifice in the Americas. The Aztec world stained ritual with sacrifice. Captured warriors, slaves, and sometimes members of the community were offered to gods in elaborate ceremonies. The ritual often combined aspects of punishment and religious necessity. Warriors taken in war could become sacrificial victims, their deaths presented as prerequisites for cosmic balance. Priests, drums, and the rise of a crowd framed the act, the condemned sometimes experiencing a swift death by heart extraction, their hearts offered atop temples as flames licked the sky. For the Aztec and other Mesoamerican cultures, sacrifice was not mere cruelty, but a cosmological act, feeding deities, renewing cycles, and legitimizing rulership. To contemporary observers, it appears shocking. In context, the ritual functioned as social glue and ultimate enforcement of religious law. 8. Darius, Xerxes, and the spectacle of execution. The Achaemenid Empire managed a vast multi-ethnic realm. Persian sources and foreign observers record executions that ranged from stoning to more theatrical punishments. Herodotus tells stories, sometimes likely embellished, of kings ordering elaborate deaths, flaying, crucifixion, and being fed to animals. These stories reflect both actual practices and the imaginations of those who told them, painting Persian courts as places where mercy and terror coexisted. Classical reports require scrutiny. Ancient historians often mixed fact with sensationalism. Still, the persistence of such tales indicates that the Persian world, like others, used dramatic punishments to uphold order and royal authority. 9. Viking execution and the sacralization of death. Vikings, traders, raiders, and law speakers often resolved crimes within localized assemblies called things. Punishments included outlawry, a sentence that removed legal protection, making the person prey to violence. Execution methods could be grisly: beheadings, drowning, or even more elaborate displays. In some sagas, traders were tied to a rock at low tide, a public and prolonged death. Outlawry is a form of social death. The person loses place in the community's legal and ritual life. When the law refused protection, the wider world became the instrument of punishment. 10. Egyptian ritual and punishment. Egypt's legal system mixed religious norms with state control. High crimes like sacrilege, murder of officials, or rebellion could lead to execution, sometimes cruel, but often accompanied by ritualized elements meant to offend the afterlife. The Egyptian cosmological concern for the body's preservation meant that mutilation had spiritual consequences. Pharaohs used public punishment to reinforce divine kingship, ensuring that those who undermined the state also jeopardized their souls. The Egyptians typically favored capital punishment for severe crimes, but also imprisonment, forced labor, and fines. The threat of denial of proper burial, socially and religiously devastating, amplified the deterrent power of the law. 11. Public humiliation and corporal punishment. Not all punishments aimed to kill. Across the ancient world, public humiliation, stocks, dunce-like displays, branding, and whipping, stripped people of honor. In honor-bound societies, shame could be a fate worse than death. Markets and town squares became theaters where social order was both enacted and judged. The merchant discovered cheating might be paraded with a placard describing his crime. A woman judged guilty of adultery could face public shaming or physical penalties enforced by men who believed they were upholding patriarchal honor. 12. Sacrifice, religion, and state power. Many brutal punishments gained moral force because religion sanctioned them, whether through priestly decree, royal claim to divine right, or popular belief in cosmic balance. Religion bound law and spectacle. Sacrificial killings, dismemberments that affected ancestral rites, and public executions used sacred language to justify extreme penalties. To separate law from religion in the ancient world is often impossible. Each fed the other. As modern viewers, we recoil, yet understanding these punishments means seeing the ancient world on its own terms, survival in fractious societies, fragile political systems and cosmologies that made physical integrity inseparable from social life. Why such brutality? Why did ancient societies adopt brutal punishments? Several reasons recur. Deterrence. Public exemplary punishments scared potential wrongdoers. Authority. Rulers used spectacle to display control and make law visible. Cosmology. Beliefs about purity, the afterlife, and social balance demanded harsh responses. Practicality. Without modern prisons, mutilation and public execution served as enduring punishments. Social cohesion. Punishment reaffirmed community norms and punished those who threatened the group's survival. Many modern legal systems evolved from these practices, softening cruelty while retaining the underlying goals: deterrence, retribution, and restoration. Yet the ancient reliance on spectacle remains etched into our institutions. Public trials, media coverage of punishment, and political theater continue to shape how societies display and enact justice. Studying ancient punishments forces us to confront harsh truths. They reveal the fragility of law, the lengths rulers will go to secure power, and the human cost of order. But they also illuminate how communities battled chaos, tried to deter harm, and bound themselves with stories of consequence. History is a mirror. Sometimes it shows us what we have escaped, sometimes what we still carry.